question for you, John. What happens when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force?
Normally a disaster. Why?
Well, that's not the kind of foot I wanted to get off on, but I was going to say the post-game press conference. That's what you get. You get an unstoppable force and an immovable object, and myself and yourself. It's Ryan Pigeot and John Lodge, and we're back. It's been a while since we recorded an episode here, eh? It's been since 2020. So we're going to get off to a rolling start. We have a couple of things to talk about: NHL, MLB, in the main kind of forefront of things. Obviously, there's still other sports going on. We've got some crazy news in the NFL with Deshaun Watson is really the main story there. So I might get your take on that later on if we have some time. But we got a bunch of episodes down the road to record too. So don't you worry. We're back. We're rolling. And by the sounds of it, we're both excited to get talking about sports again together, right?
Yeah, breaking news in the NFL actually. Just before we came to air, Sam Darnold traded to the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, bang.
So the New York Jets moving off of Sam Darnold, most definitely going to draft a quarterback in the top 2 slot or in the number 2 slot of this year's NFL entry draft, and have moved on from Sam Darnold. And really, they only got a second, a third, and a fourth round pick for him. So really, not much return. I mean, I don't know what those picks could turn into. Tom Brady was 199th overall pick at one point, right? So
Yeah.
any of those could turn into a lottery pick, and you could be riding that player for years to come. But yeah, Sam Darnold out of New York. And as par for the course for the post game press conference, we get breaking news as we go to air.
Yeah, it seems to happen with a lot of the shows that we listen to. It's just that's the way it goes. You do information, or you throw out information, and all of a sudden it's irrelevant within half an hour. That's pretty much how you have to roll. But thank you for being our insider on the NHL already, or NFL already off the top. Today we're getting caught up to speed on last night's Leaf game. Hutchison somehow securing the win, although that second period was quite a scramble. And then everybody that follows the NHL knows the Canucks are really in deep with a COVID problem. So we'll get in touch. We'll touch on that, I should say. And then it's 1 week until the NHL trade deadline as of today, 3 p.m. next Monday. We'll find out where the guys on the trade bait list are moving. Then we have a major discussion on the MLB because we're back. The MLB is up and going. Opening week was this week, and the Jays secured their series against the Yankees. It was a promising 2-1 win in the series. You could say they finished the game 3 off with a 3-1 win, John, yesterday.
Yes,
3-1 win. So
and leading 4-0 right now.
beautiful. And Steven Matt's on the mound for the first time, debuting for the Jays. He had a tough season last year with the Mets, so he's hoping to have a bounce back. So we are essentially talking NHL and MLB today, and if anything else comes our way, we'll discuss it. If you're streaming live, feel free to direct any questions today's show on our Twitter account. It's Post Game Media. So if you'd like to make some sort of contribution, make sure to do that. And don't forget to give us a follow. I'm A for Effort, EH, the number 4 Effort. And John, you're at John Lodge Music. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. Last night's Leaf game. We'll tee it up. What do you think, man? I think the start was nice. They started off with an amazing little advantage in shots, 11-3. They're on fire, and then all of a sudden the doors get blown off, and the Flames take a 2-1 lead, I think, going into the second period. I was a little nervous because that second goal, the Mangiapane, I guess it was a deflection, but immediately the thought crosses my mind, like, that's exactly why you need goaltending. That's why the discussion that's going to come up here when we talk about trade deadline, I think my main concern going forward might even be between the pipes. But Hutchison, some way or another in that third period, is able to backstop the Leafs and allow them to force the comeback. They end up winning 4-2. What's your initial thoughts on last night's game?
Quick start. I like seeing Morgan Riley jump into the offense and get more involved. He needs to do that. He's at the top of his game when he does that. So catching Big Save Dave off guard and picking that top corner, going snipe. Good job getting it off early there. But this is just a typical Daryl Sutter team, right? This is a grinded out, be physical, take over the play, take over the game, and do what needs to be done to get the win. And that's what happened after the first goal. The Leafs lost control of the game. Calgary did what they needed to do. They played the cycle game, and then they got lucky. They really got lucky. And you bring up Hutchison and bring up the goaltending situation, and we'll get into that after we break down this game. But on those 2 goals, I really can't blame Hutch for those 2 goals. You look at the Giordano shot that was deflected up top corner. That was a shot that was along the ice. Hutch was most certainly going to get a pad on that one, and then it goes in the exact opposite direction. What are you supposed to do, right? And on the second one on Mangiapane, he used the Leaf stick as a ramp. it wasn't quite a deflection. It was like they both came together, and he had more force, the Leaf player, and it went straight up again over Hutchison, and it makes him look bad because he's standing there as he goes in. He's standing there like this. He's like,
That's
what
what I didn't
happened,
like.
right?
When I see it, I'm like, how does a goalie just not read that? Just where it went in on the net. Again, I think it's because we're biased and we know there's a bit of a goaltending issue. Like, nobody's healthy, and this is the guy we're relying on. So it was like, oh no, like that's exactly the issue. But you're right. It's kind of hard to stop in that kind of situation. But when you see it go in that optic, you're like, oh my god, look at this. Stand up and
Yeah.
it'll hit you. That's what it felt like.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes him look bad. Like I said, the finished product of it makes him look bad. But I'll give it to Hutch, man. I think
Yeah,
Hutch played a good game last night. He did what needed to be done, especially in that second period, man. He made some key saves. He got his body in front of the puck, and the Leafs played a decent defensive style game, right? They didn't give up too
right.
many opportunities, too many odd man rushes, and too many 10 bell or saves or no 10 bell saves were needed, right, from Hutchison, because I don't know if he's capable of that, to be honest with you. But
Right.
the goaltending situation is definitely an issue in Toronto. But one thing that might not be an issue, and one thing that actually might allow the Leafs to go and look at a goaltender in the trade market is the resurgence of Galchenyuk
Right.
as a Toronto Maple Leaf. Now the
Right.
Leafs before Galchenyuk came up, before he got plugged into that second line, there were talks about Leafs going after a top six forward, someone to play with John Tavares, someone who could get that line going, get a little bit of an engine going. And lo and behold, you already had that guy in your system, Alex Galchenyuk. He was picked up on the waivers or via trade earlier in the year. He's down with the Marlies. Now he's got a goal, 3 assists in 8 games with the Leafs, and he's looking like he fits in on that line.
Why does he looks so much of a different player now? Like it again, you hear everybody say it's because he's aware this is pretty much his final shot, right? He's played on what 7 teams in 4 years. They keep bringing up that stat, but why he's playing like a grinder? Like he goes out on that line with Tavares and Nylander, and he's actually turning pucks over. He's working hard. He's beating guys to pucks. He's not Hyman, but he's doing the work that Hyman would do when you put him on that line to get those guys going.
Yeah, I was just gonna say he's a little bit of a Hyman light, and maybe it's because now he realizes where he's at in the situation. You can lie to yourself. I'm Montreal. I'm the savior. I'm the guy, right? And then you move on from team to team, and you can lie to yourself on the Arizonas of the world, and Ottawa, and so on and so forth. But when you land on the Toronto Maple Leafs, you know, I am not the guy. I am just a guy. I might be less than just a guy. I'm the chance I can be a guy,
Yeah.
right? And not only that, but you have great coaching, great skills and developmental, and the ability to just look up to guys like you said, like a Zach Hyman, and see how he plays his game, and maybe take a little bit off of Zach Hyman and go and do that. I find Mikheyev does that too.
Yep.
He's shown a
Yep.
lot more of Zach Hyman in his game this year than he had last year, even pre-injury. Obviously, he had a better scoring touch, but he didn't play this style of game. It was speed and scoring. Now he's got another dimension. So once he gets back to that scoring touch with Mikheyev, he'll have an even more well-rounded game. So Zach Hyman, that makes him that much more important to this team as we talk about trades and we talk about free agency and we talk about the future of the Toronto Maple Leafs. You got to have a guy like Zach Hyman on your team. If you see the ripple effects, he's affecting Galchenyuk, he's affecting Ilya Mikheyev, he's affecting every line he's on. He is a cornerstone piece to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and a name that you would not have thought of 5 years ago as being this guy.
Well, it goes back to kind of the story about Hyman again. Is everyone talks about him being this depth guy, this bottom six guy right from the beginning, and then he goes up and he plays with Matthews and Marner in that first year when that we first see that line come together, and everyone's kind of comparing him to a Chris Kunitz, right? Like, look, there's a guy who can play with all these skilled guys. Maybe he doesn't have the same toolbox, but he has that ability to work hard, and he can think the game in a way that allows these guys to flourish. And over time, you've just seen where, like again, that ripple down effect, he really is just a bottom six guy. Zach Hyman, again, when it comes down to paying him in the offseason, it's going to be the biggest debate, just like it was with the last couple off seasons with the more skilled guys. But what he brings to this team, it's nothing but bottom six tools, right? It's nothing but just hard work and determination and strength and just absolute muscle, right? That's all it really is. But in the end, like you said, it's kind of trickled down to those other lower pieces in the lineup, those other depth pieces. I wanted to add Engvall in there, just because it's those guys with size and strength that they don't necessarily grow on trees, and the GM of this team isn't normally prone to even drafting and developing that. He's kind of more so on the the bias of the smaller skilled guys. So when you have those guys in the lineup and so many of them right now, adding Galchenyuk to that mix again, he's one of those guys who traditionally to begin with was a smaller skilled forward, and it's kind of hit this point where when you see all the depth in this lineup, you see all the skilled guys being paid what they're being paid, and everybody else kind of slotting in underneath there. It does start with Hyman, but you're right. There's more than just that, and all those guys in my mind make up the core depth of this team, and that's kind of where I think you're right. The offensive kind of side of things, even looking down in the Marlies, where you've got Nick Robertson healthy and ready to come up. The Leafs just signed SDA, not signed him, but brought him over from wherever. I think he was playing in the KHL, maybe even in the KHL Junior League. But his season's done, so he's over here. You've got a whole bunch of guys coming up in the minor leagues that are kind of on that bubble of pushing guys out of spots anyway. So I'm with you. It's almost changed from now that they've got Galchenyuk amongst all this group of core forwards that can fill out the lineup. If you're going to miss a guy for 2 games per se, I really do think that you have to kind of start in the week ahead making your trade focus either between the pipes. I think that's the main priority, or to get that other depth defenseman that's going to really solidify a run for the cup. But we went right from breaking down the last night's game into kind of the future of the team and all that. But in the end, I just want to make sure we tee up tonight's game at 9:30. It's in Calgary as well. Is Campbell getting the start tonight? Do we have the confirmation on that?
I don't have confirmation yet, but he was in the starter's net for practice, and he left early. So normally the starter doesn't stay for all of practice on
Yeah.
a game day. So it
So it's
seems like
assumed.
it's trending that way.
Okay, it's assumed. Well, that's our main conversation here is probably for I want to say the better part of a month, maybe a month and a half, we've understood that not only is Anderson injured and kind of on the IR, but Campbell is also every time he comes in, he's battling something. It goes all the way back to the meeting with Calgary when Kachuk landed on him, right? We're talking a long time ago now. So every time this guy comes in, he seems to get the job done. He's 8-0. Like he's on fire with the Leafs, and everybody seems to enjoy how he gets things done. He might not look sexy in the net, but he gets it done. But the real conversation is for a team we just talked about how strong they seem with the offensive depth and how they might only be one or two pieces away on defense. How can you go forward with this season knowing that your 1A and 1B, if that's what we're going to start to call them down the road, is like we're in that kind of situation? What do you think um, kind of the smartest move would be right now as of a week ahead of the deadline?
It really all hinges on where we're at with Freddie, right? And the recent news coming out of Toronto is that Fred is on the right path. He's trending towards being back next week, and all's well and good. And if that's the case, then you're fine. You don't need to add another goaltender, because hopefully, when Fred comes in, you don't need to have Campbell starting 2 or 3 in a row. You can give him this rest. You can go
Yeah.
1-1 with them and be comfortable going 1-1 with them, right? And that's the dream scenario, and that's what has me shaking my head about this goalie controversy in Toronto. Everyone is ready to anoint Jack Campbell as the next one, and usher Freddie out down the trash chute, and like we always do with our goaltenders. When we're done using them like our dirty laundry, we just push them out the chute, and
Let
down
Monk
they
come get
go.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just it's disgusting, really, the way we treat goaltenders here in Toronto. And Frederick Anderson has done nothing but give his entire body and soul, all of his game, everything he's got, to the city of Toronto. He's been a career 900 plus 900 save percentage, except for this season when he's clearly been injured. And you're ready to anoint Jack Campbell on 8 games. 8 games. Can I remind you, Ryan, and remind everybody who is listening right now, streaming live or watching later, that the Leafs have played 38 games, and you're ready to anoint a guy who has won 8 of them.
Right.
8. The other 30 games, now Freddie's won 13, Hutchison has won 4 now, but Campbell has won 8 and you're ready to anoint this guy to be the starter and to run. Are you even confident that this guy can give you 4 to 7 games in a playoff series? Honestly,
See, that's why I say, like, again, it comes down to the way he gets things. He doesn't look sexy in the net, but the numbers don't lie, right? When Campbell is in that net, and my dad says it himself, his team seems to play differently in front of him. It's that classic cliche. They play differently in front of the guy. And my issue is not that I think Anderson deserves any you know, discredit. But going all the way back to halfway through last season when he went down with that groin injury, he's really never been the same Anderson. And then I start to think to myself, well, the Anderson that I know and I've always loved has been the one who has taken this team that does deserve a playoff uh, chance or a playoff, whatever you want to call it, berth. And he's literally just handed it to them with his play, being outshot almost on a night in, night out basis. And just carrying the load. But then I always think back to those clutch moments where, yeah, he wasn't able to essentially get it done or get the big save. I'm not saying that he's not a great goaltender, but I really do wonder in this day and age where it's such a penny pinching league and this team is already set up for failure, kind of in some people's eyes, the way that the money's allocated. I really think that like this goaltender, like the dollar value that he's commanding, it's good now. But if you're gonna have to give him any sort of raise, this team might economically need to go with Campbell regardless. They might be hamstrung. And unfortunately, that's gonna mean either Anderson has to force them to sign him and to actually like rejig their whole approach, or the writing is on the wall. And I think with his play so far, because he's been injured, there he hasn't done enough to like reclaim the love of Leafs fan base. You see some games he shows up and he plays amazing. He's dialed in and Twitter says, eat that. Like, watch, there's Freddie Anderson's back. And then here we are again talking about another injury. And I think, unfortunately, the way that the cards are kind of showing up for Freddie is it's like he's reached his peak. He's done what he can do in Toronto. And now, no matter what, this team has kind of matured beyond what his capabilities are. Now, I could be proven wrong, but again, in the last year and a half sample size, he hasn't been the same goaltender that he was in those 4 years that he gave them their playoff berth, the berth that was, I think, undeserved. So again, now it's almost like the team that's more mature needs the goaltender that's less of a star so that they give themselves that mental boost to play better in front of. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But what I do know is again, the numbers are speaking for themselves. It's something where Campbell comes in, doesn't look great in the net, like from a um, like a actual found what's the word I'm looking for, from a methodical standpoint, right? He doesn't look sexy in there, and all of a sudden he's making the saves that get it done. So I wonder if down the road when you're really pinching the numbers, like it's time to actually move on from a goaltender who you have to give a ring to if you win a cup this season. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy how it works out in the season. But you're right, the way that we chew up and spit out goaltenders here, we don't deserve somebody like Freddie. We never did from the beginning. Like this jersey hanging on the wall behind the camera will stay there no matter if he's here or not. I love the guy, but it's hard to justify keeping a guy when you can't even have faith in him anymore.
I really, really think that the Pittsburgh Penguins would love to have Marc-Andre Fleury this year, don't you think?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Right?
I also
And
think
do you want to
Anderson
be in
would
that
go.
same situation? Do you want to
Yeah,
be in that same situation? Do you want to be Pittsburgh? Do you want to be Pittsburgh and say, hey, Tristan Jarry can do this, right? Casey DeSmith can do this. Matt Murray can do this. All of those answers to me are no, 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 they cannot, right? And they threw away Marc-Andre Fleury. And look at what Fleury is doing for the Vegas Golden Knights, for a young, energized team that can score goals, that can play defense. And Jim Rutherford wanted to trade for Fleury
but
before
even
he
Fleury's had
quit.
his issues since then, right? Even Fleury's had to have a guy come in to essentially create a tandem there that wouldn't be necessary if he was the Fleury that he used to be. Like he's
But
now got Robin Leonard carrying him on nights that he's not able to get it done.
that's the way the NHL works nowadays. Yarrow Halak carries Tuukka Rask when he can't do it.
Right.
Anton Khudobin has carried Ben Bishop because he couldn't do it. Right.
Grubauer carried Holtby the year that the Capitals won the cup,
Right.
and Holtby was kind of that
But
Anderson goalie.
Columbus has their two goalies, Merzlikins and Corpusalo, and you look over to the Rangers, and they've got their two guys, right? That's how the NHL works nowadays, man. You need two goaltenders. The era of the guy playing 60, 70 games and winning a majority of them, that is gone. The game is too fast. It's it's too intense. There's too much needed from your body for you to ask that much out of your goaltender. Just because he's not skating 3 or 4 miles on the ice a day does not mean it's not mentally taxing on the position to be back there, right? So yeah, you need a 1A, you need a 1B. And that's why I say the Leafs need Frederik Andersen and they need Jack Campbell.
They
Jack
need them
Campbell is,
healthy. They need
yeah,
them healthy. And that's the real conversation though, right? Is that both of these guys that they're relying on, neither one of them is healthy right now. And so going right back to the kind of point is that we're a week ahead of trade deadline. I think what you're telling me is what I already believe they probably need to go out and get some sort of goaltending like better than just a Michael Hutchison. Like they're gonna have to it sounds like Freddie's progressing, and that's really all that they can tell us, which tells me he will be on the IR for a while, and we will be relying on this Campbell, who we can't even guarantee is healthy. You saw the other night he played great and still he was limping after making a save, and you're going, oh my god, that's the only faith we have that somebody can really steal games. Again, Hutchison was great last night. I don't think he can steal games. He's got
yeah,
amazing
that's
looking pad. Like those pads, by the way, are awesome. Just it's got that. I think it's a shout out to Newfoundland because I think that's the Newfie flag. Just the way that he's got it
it's
all
got an
laid
old
out.
school gear look. Yeah,
Oh
it's
man!
really nice, crisp look to it.
But usually
Um,
goalies that aren't good need good gear to make them at least look good, right? So going back to it, it's just Campbell and Anderson. Cool, we have them here, but we technically don't have the best version. We might have 70% of both of them right now, and you can't go forward with that as your like if you're Kyle Dubas, you can't stake this season on those two goalies kind of hopefully being healthy when you need to use them. They're almost going to need to have to get somebody here. It's at that point.
Not a lot of goaltenders on the market right now, Ryan, and not a lot of guys who you could really say are an upgrade on Hutchison, right? And which is funny to say, but it is just the truth
Okay.
out there on the goaltending market. But there are a couple interesting names that I could throw out at you, and they're familiar names to Leaf Nation. So I'll post a question. One of two guys you could bring back as your replacement for Michael Hutchison. Is it Johnny Burns or is it Optimus Rhymes?
I heard in Carolina they could be willing to move on from Optimus Rhyme. Johnny Burns, we've seen what he can do here, and I'm not a big fan. He's a fan of Nelson Mandela's though. I'll never forget that, and I believe that's the reason they wouldn't reacquire him. But maybe not, but maybe. Like that might not be facetious. Like they maybe wouldn't reacquire him for that reason alone. But hey, he's a small goalie that's really good at sucking up pucks like a vacuum and limiting rebounds. I if they could get a deal on him real cheap, then yeah, I wouldn't be against it because again, I think this is a dire situation. I believe Campbell would be 3 times better than a Johnny Bernier though. So it comes down to or sorry, Hutchison. Hutchison yeah, Bernier would be better than Hutchison. I was trying to compare Campbell to Bernier, but again, those are the two guys that are injured. We can't really apples to oranges there. Yeah, that wouldn't make sense. I don't know, man. I think Linus Allmark is a guy in Buffalo that they talked about.
Does he not have starter potential though? Like, is that not a guy that might cause a little bit too much of it, too many issues? It's funny to say that you don't want to trade for a starter in this situation, right? But
Well, here's where I don't want to. Again, the jersey's behind the camera. You know where I'm going with this. If they trade for a starter, then it's that guy and Campbell going forward, especially if that guy's on a cheap deal and one with remaining term. That's that simple, right? Because it comes down to the economy. We know for a fact that the salary cap isn't going up, and that was Dubas's entire plan when he re-signed these or when he signed these guys to money that he knew from the beginning. He said from the beginning, oh, it's going to be worth it in 5 years when everyone else is getting these crazy contracts and these guys are at a low. No, it's not changing. These guys are overpaid. So in the end, like the economy is going to dictate what happens. The two biggest guys we've talked about already, Anderson and Hyman, you have to keep Hyman. You have to.
has Anderson not played himself out of a race
I
in
believe,
in a
I
way
believe,
where
yeah,
you
at the minimum, he's played himself out of a raise, but at the most, he's played himself out of Toronto. Like,
you go? I think Dubas could possibly sell him a short term contract. Though, is what I'm saying.
like a 1 year, $3 million. Like I don't think he
Not
would
even
get
three,
less. I
like
don't think he'd get
a
less than he's worth.
one at even money. What he's making right now, 5, right? And play. Let's revisit free agency again next year,
You know what? It's
right?
not crazy because the fact that like again, we're in this type of economy and it's not illegal to give a guy a 1 year deal, even though in a traditional circumstance, he'd be getting another 4 or 5 year deal. Like that's how it would normally work. But we saw how Taylor Hall did his thing this year. And that gets us right into kind of the upcoming trade bait list, right? But it's not a crazy idea what you've just said there. I mean, I don't think I've heard it elsewhere. So, John Lodge,
I
heard it here
mean,
first.
1 year deal, Freddie Anderson. He's still a top 5 goaltender when he's on the top of his game, in my opinion. And I think it's a mistake to give him up. And we'll move on.
I
We'll
want to
move
say
on from the topic and get to other
before we
things.
move
But
on, I want to agree with you, but I haven't seen healthy Freddie Anderson, I think, for 2 years. I've
well,
said this.
you brought it up, man. As soon as he hurt that groin, he hasn't been the same. And maybe he needs time to work on that, and then he gets back to it. But I would hate. I'll let you finish your thought. I would hate to see him go somewhere else and like say Pittsburgh and light it up and then win a cup with Pittsburgh, a la what Kessel did, and rub it right in
Yeah,
the face of Leafs Nation.
I could see him going to a young team like the Leafs when he went there in the beginning that doesn't deserve a playoff spot and stops way more shots than he should, lets in the odd stinker like we know he does, and wins them a playoff round or at least gets them to the playoffs. But I think it's like that meme we saw a couple of weeks ago that went around, and it was, I think, really accurate. It was the Ninja Turtles and Shredder, when Shredder's like accompanying the 4 like baby Ninja Turtles, and it said Freddy 4 years ago, and it had like the Marner, Matthew names over top, and then it said, the next picture was like old Shredder, and these Ninja Turtles like literally chaperoning him down, and you're like, yeah, that's literally what it feels like has happened. Freddy has gone from like the guy who carries this team to the guy who needs to be carried within 4 years, and I'd love to see him go to a team like a young team like a Minnesota, for example. That's like, because of Kirill Kaprizov, they've had a little bit of a resurgence. They have young talent, and they just can never get. I mean, they've got Kaapo Kakko in there, who's played really well. But again, an example like that where all of a sudden he goes there and he does what Freddie can do. I just feel like for him, sometimes he relies on the positioning and size, but he's not always like dialed into a game, I feel like. And maybe that's just the injury. But with Campbell, feels like he doesn't rely on the positioning, doesn't rely on the size, just relies on always being dialed in. And that's what you need. I feel like some teams need a certain attribute from a goalie, and maybe Anderson's attribute is not what they need anymore. That's what it's starting to feel like based on how he's played in a year and a half, going back to the groin, like I said. But I love the guy, man. Jersey's behind me. Like, he'll always be a Leaf in my mind. I wanted to get a Great Dane and name it Freddie based on him being the greatest Dane ever to play hockey. Listen
The
to me.
best ability is availability.
Next Leaf games, Wednesday, April 7th, they're hosting the Habs. Saturday, April 10th, they host the Sens. And then Monday, deadline day, 3 p.m. They host, no, they're in Montreal at 7. So we'll know by then if anything's happening. But we're all thinking a trade should be happening any moment, because we got a week before the trade deadline actually, or before the player you acquire can be here. They've shortened it from 14 days to 7, right? So at this point in Canada, what our GM, what Kyle Dubas is looking at, and any GM in the other 7 teams, is if I'm making a trade, it's going to have to be potentially now. Do you agree with that?
Well, I mean, I think if he was going to do anything serious, he probably would have already done it. And I don't mean to throw
It
water on.
felt like that. It felt like that 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Leaf Nation, to throw water on your hopes, but I mean, if Kyle Dubas was going to bring in a piece that was going to really make a difference, then he was going to bring it in already. And there's 18 or 17 games left on the schedule for the Leafs, and
When they
maybe
had their
even less than
week
that.
off, right? They had like 5 or 6 days off. Everybody assumed that's when the trade was happening. So I feel like
They
that's,
have they had the 5 days off, right? But then they had one game, and then they had another 4 days off.
yeah. And
So
everyone
like that
thought,
was
there
the
it is.
time. That was the time, right? And if nothing happens, and then I don't see how you can make a deal really that's going to make a splash. I just, like I said, I just assume that it would have already been done if it was going to be a
Yeah.
difference maker, because you want to get them as much time with the team as possible to build a chemistry, build a rapport, get to know the systems, get to know how we run the power play. And unfortunately, in Toronto, they don't run a power play. Apparently, they just don't.
So everybody
How
wanted
can
Manny
they go
Malhotra on the Legends row at the start of the season, and now they want him canned. Isn't that weird?
like what the hell's going on with this power play? Like, I mean, come on, it's been 10 games since they've put anything past a goaltender with the man advantage, and it's more like a powerless power play. And if you're ready for a hot take, it's time to take Wayne Simmons off the number 1 unit and put Galchenyuk there, because he's not doing anything for me.
I mean, it's what have you done for me lately? The guy's coming back from a broken wrist and hasn't really looked the same that he did at the start of the season. Similar to Thornton, right? Like, those are guys that at the very beginning they were playing top 6 roles, and They looked fast. They were contributing, and at this point, you're bringing Hyman up on those lines or Galchenyuk to do Hyman's work because you're starting to see a little bit of a wear and tear on those guys, the older guys later on in the season, especially having battled back from those specific injuries. So, yeah, man, I actually can't disagree because again, it is a what have you done for me lately? There's not a single person in Leafs Nation who disagrees with like giving Galchenyuk more minutes based on how he's played. If you are the only real disagreement is how what do you call him? Is it Galley? Is it Chucky? Is it
Oh,
Gouch?
I call him Galley. I call him
Galley.
Galley.
I knew you'd
That's
have
just the way.
an off. I only named three of them, and you gave me a fourth option. So that's I knew you'd have one right off the board. Galley. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my go-to nickname for him ever since he's been and ever since the Leafs acquired him. I've been telling my buddies, I've been feeding it to him, was just saying, man, he's going to be up here with the Leafs. He's going to make a difference with the Leafs, and they're laughing at me, telling me how he's been on 6 different teams and he hasn't done anything since Montreal. And I mean, you don't lose your skill. This isn't Space Jam #1. The Monstars didn't come and steal Alex Galchenyuk's ability to play hockey. He just lost his confidence.
You talked about Galchenyuk and the fact that he came to the Leafs, he was really disappointing, and everybody kind of had written him off. That's kind of the way people are talking about Taylor Hall, the number one guy on the trade list right now. Is he had like 2 goals? The last I heard, Buffalo is obviously the worst place in the world to play, regardless of the league, ECHL, AHL. Like combine them all, they've been one of the worst teams to date. Their historic losing streak, obviously, so we know what's going on there. But what do you think about a guy like Taylor Hall going to a team, maybe not Toronto, but in that similar regard? He would be a significant increase to a team's offense. And I think there's a couple of teams that be looking forward to acquiring him, even a Canadian team. Could you not see that happen?
I don't know if he fits in on any of the Canadian teams. I mean, unless Winnipeg's looking to do something
That's,
drastic.
I wonder.
Um,
Winnipeg
but
honestly could go after Ekholm any day and make themselves a very scary looking team. But then again, Nashville's on fire and not trading anybody now.
I think Taylor Hall would be a really good fit on Boston.
Yeah, everyone goes
Really,
there too.
I mean, you could like Pasta hasn't been amazing. He's getting back to his normal style of play, right? But to be able to pair a guy like Taylor Hall with a Brad Marchand or David Pasternak, or to put him on Bergeron's line, and just to let him disappear into that sort of a situation in the same way that Phil Kessel disappeared into the Pittsburgh Penguins, right?
Oh,
Everywhere
reminiscent
Taylor,
of when Rick Nash went to Boston, right? Like just a huge piece on a team that essentially goes in the top 6 and fills you out and makes you a cup contender immediately.
yeah. Well, everywhere Taylor Hall has been, he's been the guy. When he was drafted in Edmonton as a #1 pick, he was supposed to be the guy. Then he was traded to the Devils. I believe it was the Devils first, right? And he was
Yeah,
supposed to be
Adam
the
Marchand.
guy, right? And then he's traded, like he's traded again. He's signed in free agency to Buffalo, and not that he's Jack Eichel, but he's supposed to be. He's got a $9 million contract. He's supposed to be the guy, right? And so in this situation, if you can go and put him on a team like the Boston Bruins, as much as it pains me in my stomach to say how it would make Boston so much better in a year where they really have struggled to remain amongst the top of their division. It would really put them over the top. I really think it would help a lot of their goal scoring woes. I think it would help Taylor Hall get out of his funk that he's been in all year, and give him a legitimate chance at a really good contract. Maybe even with re-signing with the Bruins in the offseason, right? That's really the only place I see him. I don't see him in a
Here's
North
one.
Division team.
Here's one for you. The place that they all thought he might sign in the offseason for that 1 year deal. He ended up choosing Buffalo, but where did everybody assume he was going to go?
I can't
Colorado.
remember.
It was Colorado.
Oh yes, oh yes. I For some reason I thought he got traded to Colorado, but he didn't. That's right. They were players on him when he did get traded, or when he didn't get traded at the deadline. Sorry.
Imagine that.
Um,
There's a team who's already just an absolute offensive firepower. If they can add a guy with like Taylor Hall on a deal like his, just for a rental. I mean, if they can, so if they can fit it in there, it's an important piece to add. Like you're trying to become unstoppable. You're trying to have no lines match up against you in a playoff round, and you got Taylor Hall added to a team that's already got Rantanen and McKinnon. And I'm already missing name like Kadri's an important name in there, but Landeskog,
Kale
like
McCarr,
Kale, yeah, Kale
Landeskog. Yep.
McCarr. It's a ridiculous team. So, um, I could see him going there. I could see him going to a place like Dallas. I could see him going to a couple of different places that are already good teams. Just because, again, when he signed that deal in the offseason, everybody thought that's a really, really cheap. He's moving at the deadline. Immediately, he's going to Buffalo, so he's moving to the deadline. We all knew that, but just the dollar value in the contract, you're going, man, this is something that a team's going to pay handsomely for, like a first round pick, and probably a prospect to acquire that. So I don't see the Leafs going in on him. I just see maybe the Winnipeg Jets being a team, although I think for them, the main concern would be defense. Like Pionk has been a really good piece for them. Same with Josh Morrissey, but beyond that, they don't have tons. And that was kind of their main concern going into the season. They go and acquire Dubois, make their offense that much more. I guess it evens out with Line, but they actually have consistency with this player. And I think again, if you were to go out before Nashville went on their little run, if you're Winnipeg and you acquire Ekholm and maybe even somebody else, like you're the best team in Canada. You are. You've already got Hellebuck. You've already got comparative offense to any team in the league. And then you go out and solidify your defense. To me, if you're a Leaf fan, that's your biggest worry, is that come deadline day, Winnipeg makes a move that you can't contend with. So again, if you're Dubas and you see that coming, you either push all the chips in and trade the prospect that you said you were going to a month ago, back at like March 16th, or you let it happen. But again, I think Winnipeg is the only real team in Canada that could go after one of these big pieces and make it a real issue for Toronto. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I
Like, is
think
there another
Winnipeg
team?
is.
Maybe
I,
Edmonton. I guess Edmonton could contend with that comment, but Winnipeg is the team.
I think Edmonton has too much going on to add another element like Taylor Hall into the locker room.
But
I don't
if
think
they get
that
a goalie or if
would
they get
fit.
at home, they might contend. I just don't think they're on the same par as Winnipeg and Toronto yet.
But Winnipeg is definitely the biggest threat, in my opinion, to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the North Division. I don't want to miss this point with the Colorado Avalanche and talking about how good of a fit they would be for Taylor Hall, or how good of a fit he would be for them. I gotta give props to Jackie Redmond for this one, because this is where I'm getting my information from. But we think about the Colorado Avalanche and we think about how good offensively they've been, but they are actually the number one defensive team in every single defensive matrix.
Holy,
And I'm not even going to go through them all, but they're that good of a team that not only are they scoring all the goals, they're stopping all the goals. They're keeping people down in chances and rush attempts and all that sort of stuff. They're first in all of it, all of it. So Colorado Avalanche would be a fantastic team for Taylor Hall to go to, because that would be the team that would be able to cover up any sort of blips or mistakes Hall would make on the offense, cover up for anything that he does out there. Another team where there are four guys ahead of you in the depth chart. That's why I think Toronto, by the way, is not a fit for Taylor Hall, because there aren't four guys ahead of him in the depth chart for Toronto when you're talking about goal scoring. I'm sorry, if you put Taylor Hall on this team, it goes Matthews, Marner, Hall. Right? As much as we love Nylander, we love John Tavares, we love Zach Hyman for what he does, we're talking about pure goal scoring potential. You're automatically putting Taylor Hall in the top three, and that puts too much pressure on him. You put him in
here
Boston,
I
I put
would
Bergeron,
say
Marchand, and Pasternak over top of him, right?
I
So
agree with you there, but imagine this. You know how we always talk about how Hyman kind of makes whatever. Like, in an ideal world, Zach Hyman on the third line essentially means you have three unstoppable lines. I don't even care who else is there with Hyman. You might end up having to trade Kerfoot in the process to get rid of the contract. Although Kerfoot's one of those guys I kind of hold close to my heart because I really do like him every shift. But here's the thing: I'm making this point. If you've got Matthews, Marner, Hall, Tavares, Nylander, you've essentially got five of a top six right there. You put Galchenyuk on that line, or essentially you put Taylor Hall up there with Matthews and Marner. And you've got Galchenyuk on the second line. Now you've got Hyman on the third line with Mikheyev. Like, you're starting to really build a hard team to play against. Not saying they're not already, but I could see again in a ideal world goaltending first, defense second. But I guess I'm just trying to make an excuse as to why, if there would be a trade for Taylor Hall, I wouldn't be upset, because that would, if I'm looking at my NHL 21 Maple Leafs lines, I don't know what to do with all my depth now, because Hyman at the very least plays on the third line. It's very scary.
one of my buddies got duped by a fake post on
Uh-oh.
Facebook about a Taylor Hall trade. He came to me all excited about
Oh no.
how the Leafs acquired Hall, and he sent me the link, and I'm like, dude, that's totally fake.
What was the fake
Uh,
trade?
it was Timmy Liljegren, a first round pick, and Pierre Engvall for Taylor Hall.
I
And I
could
was
see
like,
why he'd get duped because that almost sounds like a legitimate. I'd be sad to see
I think
all
that's
three of
too
those
much. I'm going
pieces
to be
go. Yeah,
honest.
no, it's too much. I'd be sad to see all three of those pieces go, but I would justify it as I guess that's the cost of doing business, and you really have to put faith in Hall that he's going to work out. Because I mean, you and I can both agree, Liljegren's been here long enough that it's if he were to get traded, I wouldn't necessarily be disappointed. I would be kind of rattled if he was good, but I think we know that he's lower down the prospect depth chart, so we're not necessarily offended by moving on from him. Engvall's also a piece that you can replace and a first round pick if you're going to win a cup. Cool, but you're right. That is still a lot for one guy. But I could see. I'm trying to give this guy a reason, an excuse as to why you might get caught up in that. That sounds like okay. You got Taylor Hall for three pieces. Okay,
It sounds like a legit hockey move, but when you start to like just break it down, you're just like, yeah, but I mean, I could see a first round pick for Taylor Hall. Honestly, that's if you're getting a first now, if it was a second round pick and Liljegren and Pierre Engvall, then I could see where we're going here. But the second you start with
yeah.
that first round pick, that severely limits anything else you're getting out of me because God knows where we're finishing.
All right.
In
Next time. Oh,
so
sorry. I thought you were finished there. My bad.
no, it's fine. I was just going to ramble. So yeah, we can
All
move
good.
on.
I was gonna say next time we have a show, we'll be even that much closer to deadline day, but it will be pre-deadline day, so we won't spend too much more time on that. I'm gonna move down to the West, stay in the Northern Division because again, this has been the main story this week with the Canucks and their COVID issues. From the last I checked, it was just 4 games postponed, just 4 due to the virus. But today, the Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly came out and said that the outbreak to him is concerning, or to the NHL, but that he's confident the team will be able to complete its schedule. I wanted to talk about that because I don't think I can agree with that right now. He said it's concerning from a health and safety standpoint, but not necessarily a scheduling standpoint. Again, I'm just concerned by that. But if anybody's not caught up to speed, Adam Gaudette had a positive test last Tuesday. And then as of yesterday, which was Sunday, 16 players on the Vancouver roster are on the protocol list. That doesn't mean all 16 are positive, if I'm correct with that, but it does mean it's a serious issue right now. And from what I've heard, again, I try to avoid the COVID news because it's just ruined my life in the last year and a half. But it's some new Brazilian variant, so there's a worry about that. But most of the COVID outbreaks in the NHL have been in the U.S., right? Dallas started the season off. You had New Jersey, Buffalo, and Ralph Kruger was an issue at one point. And then last week, Edmonton and Montreal had one game postponed. But other than that, it's been majority US. So a couple of things to touch on there. John, do you think Vancouver ends up finishing their schedule or what? It could be
So
hot take central here, but none of this really feels normal. So we have to talk about it.
So Gaudette just like head kicked the entire Canucks roster with COVID. Then,
I,
basically, is what you're telling me.
I guess so. These tests are positive, or at least there's 16 players in the protocol, meaning they were exposed to
But it all
somebody who was
started with Gaudette.
positive.
It all started with Gaudette, right? So I that's the guy we can trace this back to. And I'm not blaming anyone. You know, you get COVID, you get COVID. It is what it is. Unless you're going out there and being a jackass and not wearing a mask, not washing your hands, and just doing stupid shit. Like, just be completely honest with you, man. Like, if you're
Yeah.
doing that, then you totally deserve what you get. In regards to whether or not they can finish their season, I don't know. I don't know if Bill Daly was saying that the Utica Comets could finish the Canucks season for them, but the Utica Comets just went through a COVID outbreak themselves. So that's the Canucks minor league roster, and they're only able to call up I think one guy from the Comets. So I just it'd be one thing if these guys were asymptomatic, right? And it was a positive test and there's no symptoms and we're going to screen them, and then after 7 or 8 days they test negative. But that's not the case in Vancouver right now. There are reports of multiple team members needing the team doctor to go to their houses, administer IV fluids, and have been having severe symptoms. No one
Yeah, it's
hospitalized
bad.
as of yet, but this is a bad outbreak, and this is a situation where if we listen to Fred VanVleet and what he said after he contracted the virus and how hard it was for him to come back, and basketball, as much as it's a high intensity sport, it's not as high intensity as hockey. So now we're going to go and flip to hockey, and we're going to say that these guys, the Vancouver Canucks, who are already having a hard enough time competing in the Northern Division and staying afloat, they're going to go after an outbreak of COVID and serious side effects. They're going to come back and play the rest of their season in the next, 35 days. That's just not going to happen, Ryan. I think that the
Yeah.
NHL eventually is going to have to step in here. And as sad as it is, this is going to sound really, really selfish, but as a Leaf fan, the Leafs need those games against the Canucks because the Oilers are nipping at our heels and the Jets are nipping at our heels, and we need those games against the Canucks because we need those points, right? And if you're just to take that away from us, then what do? You're not going to add more games to the schedule where we're having to face the Oilers more and we're having to face the Jets more. So now we're not going to play as many games as the rest of the NHL. That's fine. We're in our own division. We're in our own bubble. So we're going to have to go off of a points percentage as to who places first or not. And that's just going to cause a whole stink across the entire division. It's a bad look. It's a bad situation. But when it's all said and done, you just hope and pray that everybody in Vancouver gets through this okay, and that they can continue and live happy and healthy lives beyond this, because as we know, COVID can wreak havoc on people's lives even after they've gotten over the initial illness.
Yeah, it's a concern, and like you said, like with it being more symptomatic than just a standard, oh, they've got COVID, they need to quarantine and they'll be fine. That's where I'm not 100% sure that they will be able to finish the season. Now, there's only 4 games against the Leafs. If we want to stay in that selfish standpoint, that's 8 points potentially. And finishing the season is obviously secondary to health. But yes, it's an issue. And the way Bill Daly has come out and addressed it, it doesn't sound like he's very concerned. Obviously, those were his exact words. But in the end, when you talk about, like you said, Fred VanVleet, even Rasmus Ristolainen, if you want to stick within the NHL, there was a story published at the start of the season talking about how he thought he was going to die. And this was just standard COVID, from what I understand. This was before we knew about the 14 different variants, the Timbuktu variant, and all that. We were unaware of all this, and this guy's sitting here talking about going up a flight of stairs and feeling like his heart was cracking. The Finnish translation clearly, but listen to the way he's describing this. It's not good. Like, so I can understand where, from your standpoint, we're talking about, okay, let's just make sure everybody like is safe. But at the same time, when you're listening to Bill Daly talk about, it's not concerning, we're going to finish the schedule. I wonder if they're talking about moving the start of playoffs back or what, because the last I heard, it was a week or so ago on a radio show, they did say like they plan on having, I think it was May 16th be the start of playoffs, but already the way the schedule is playing out, if they have, like, there's scheduled makeup games, I think, on May 16th, so they already cannot start. I think that was the what I thought, or what I was told. But again, don't quote me on the quote there. It's just something where you think they must have to move the playoffs back at this point if they're thinking that they can get this type of season finished with this little time. We're talking about like a month left in the season. Like every other night, teams are going to be playing without having to miss 4 games. I don't think it's going to get done. I don't see it actually coming close. But in the end, that's up to the NHL and how they choose to orchestrate things.
Well, the good thing about that is like I said, the North Division is separated from the entire league, right? So if you do need to extend the season, you only need to extend the season for us, right? And you can go ahead and the NBA has done this before, where you go ahead and you start the playoffs with or you start another round of the playoffs before one round is finished, right? And this will
Might
just
be the
basically
only
be the same
option.
thing, right? The North Division will be finishing 1 week of regular season games, while the East, the West, and whatnot are into the first round of the playoffs, right? Because they're all going to be playing against each other. So it's definitely a possibility. And it's interesting times, but yeah, like just echo like well wishes to everybody over in Vancouver, because it's definitely scary going through this. I can't even imagine what it's family members are involved in
Yeah.
this now. We're hearing about teammates and coaches, but it's beyond them. It's gone into their families. It's gone to their kids. It's gone to their wives, their spouses. So it's a scary situation over there in Vancouver. So hopefully everyone gets over this quickly.
All right. You want to move on to baseball?
Before we go to baseball, can we talk about the joke that is the fines in the NHL?
Oh yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
like,
McKinnon and
like,
McDavid in the last week, they've both been fined just 5,000, no big deal, the maximum allowed under the CBA. And I know you were a little bit hot about the McDavid won. So give me your thoughts here. Again, anybody who was unaware, McDavid ran over Kotkaniemi, kind of chased him down in the neutral zone after kind of getting, I guess, held off the score sheet for a bit. It was early in the game too, so he was just taking out some frustration on Kotkaniemi. And then you must have seen this by now. McKinnon firing an underhand bowling shot at who was it? Connor Garland of the Arizona Coyotes. His helmet, discarded
Yeah.
helmet, right into his chest. On one angle, it looks like McKinnon barely throws it, and then on another angle, it looks like he blew his head off with it. It was incredible. So, give me your take on these fines.
Okay, so before I get into the fine, the McDavid hit, if that's anyone else, that's a 1-game suspension. I'm telling you. If that is anyone else, he targeted, he took strides into it. Now, did he make initial contact with the head? No, he made initial contact with the elbow, with the chest, and it rode up into the head. But he cocked back that chicken wing and gave it to him, right?
Yeah.
And when all those things come together, you look at it, it's like, yeah, okay, that's a 1-game suspension. And if you were to suspend Connor McDavid for 1 game right now as the NHL, it's probably a loss for the Edmonton Oilers, and that could really hurt them in the playoff race, right? So I see a little bit of underhandedness in the reason why he was fined instead of suspended for this. But I mean, and then going to the McKinnon one before I talk about the fines. That McKinnon one, I don't know, man. You said you saw the one angle where it looked like he fired it into him. I guess I only saw the one angle where it looked like he tossed it at him. He obviously intentionally meant to hit him with it, but I didn't see any like
Let me clarify. I saw one angle.
Injure.
I saw one angle, just probably the same one as you. If you're looking at McKinnon when it happens, you can see how McKinnon just kind of like, it's like all in one motion. He's picking up the helmet and throwing it at once. It seems harmless. If you don't focus on McKinnon, if you're just looking at Connor Garland and the helmet, it's like, it looks like attempted murder. It's the way the helmet hits his chest. You're like, oh my gosh, that has to be, just based on the precedent alone, the way that looked, that has to be a suspension or a fine. And it makes me think of Myles Garrett. Was it Myles Garrett or somebody else in the NFL hit someone?
Yeah, Myles Garrett. It was nothing like the Myles Garrett helmet.
Nothing like it, but it reminds me of it.
You know what? Didn't Darcy Tucker or Nazem Kadri beat someone with their helmet one time as a Toronto Maple Leaf? I'm pretty sure I remember them getting suspended for literally using the helmet as like a weapon and hitting someone in the head with it. So it's happened before. That was innocent in my opinion. Maybe he meant to do like, the whole when you're hanging with your buddies, heads up, and you toss it at someone, right? Maybe that's what that was.
Think
like,
fast.
Heads up, right? Like think fast, and then and it just catches. I don't. It's not worth any sort of suspension or fine for me. But the McDavid one, definitely a suspension. And then getting on to the fines, man. Connor McDavid makes $107,000 a game,
right?
Roughly. Okay. Do you think he gives 2 flying fadoos about $5K? Honestly, do you
like
really
being
think
fined
he cares?
like $20 for you and I? Like if you make,
that's what he tips at night at the restaurant is $5,000. Okay. When you got Connor McDavid at your table, that's 20% of the bill. Okay. That's what that is. He does not care about $5,000. This is ancient. This needs to change. They need to go into the off season. They need to discuss with the PA. This has to change. It has to be a percentage of the player's contract per salary for the game.
Is that like, that's how they do it in Finland for speeding tickets? I remember Leo Komarov got pulled over once, and his fine was insurmountable because he makes millions of dollars. That's just how they do it in Finland. But here's the thing: how would that be fair? Because I think the maximum allowable under the CBA of $5K, it's because all you've got is goons ever getting fined, right? Guys that make minimal. So all of a sudden you take a guy like McDavid and he does something that happens to him all game long, not all game long, but night in and night out, those guys take abuse. And sure, they might get the LeBron treatment in terms of fouls sometimes, but they still, like, that clearly was, I'm upset about something and I need to fight back. It wasn't fair the way he did it, but in my mind, like, the reason those fines are so low is not because guys of McDavid's salaries are usually the ones like causing the infraction. So how would it be fair to now limit the guy who's the superstar from kind of exacting revenge? It sounds wrong, but to kind of bite back, like he's now got an extra level of like a limitation from biting back if now he's being fined a percentage of a salary instead of the same amount that some goon would be fined. Like, to me, there isn't now a level playing field if that happens.
In the NBA, the coach can be fined $50,000. Okay, so let's
Okay.
not cry about 5K in the NHL. The NHL has been a parrot league of the NBA for years, and so it would stand to reason that they would follow what the NBA does eventually, and fine these players exactly what they deserve to be fined. And I mean, if you take say it's a 25% game check fine, right? So that's 25 grand for Connor McDavid, but it's not 25 grand for the goon because he's not making that. He might make 7K that game, right? That goon, right? So then he doesn't
So
have
what
to pay
gives him
five.
the right to dummy McDavid all night long,
What
and then
what
McDavid can't
gives
do
you
it
the
back?
right? What gives you the right to fine that guy 5K, which is the maximum allowable under the CBA, and that's 80% of his game check, and the maximum allowable under the CBA is 1.5% of McDavid's game
Because
check. What's fair about that?
I think the guy that makes the 800K doesn't like grow the game at all or have any stake in like the actual stock of the game, whereas the guy making anything over $8 million is essentially needing to be protected because he matters to said franchise and then as an extension to league. So again, I'm not even saying that's the main point, but I'm saying like if you were to make the fine a percentage, then it does limit the guys that are able to physically harm. Because if you think about this, hockey isn't a clean sport, right? Like the way that a lot of guys play it is it's a war of attrition, especially in the playoffs. You get guys who are out there hitting to hurt. Tom Wilson is example number one. Now, are you saying that like Tom Wilson should be fined a percentage of his salary, right? But Connor McDavid should be fined a percentage of his salary for doing the same thing. Whereas both of us agree that McDavid deserves to do whatever he does to Tom Wilson, whereas Tom Wilson doesn't. Like, you know what I mean? There's almost like a level of you need to have fairness. You need to have players be able to police themselves.
I think that the percentage is the fairness in my opinion. I think if you play everyone on a level playing field, you take you puts Tom Wilson on the precipice is his history, and it stops him from being fined and going into a suspension.
The reason I use
That's
him,
where
he's the only guy that I think the percentage would actually like I would like to see that because he's one of the only guys that actually gets paid for doing the types of stuff that goons shouldn't be in the league for. He actually makes over $5 million for doing despicable things. So for him to have a percentage of his salary taken away every time he does that, I would appreciate that. But for McDavid, a guy who's known for what the game is meant to be, scoring goals, making plays, leading the league in points, for him to think something's wrong, like done wrong to him, for him to have the idea that I'm going to get him back, I'm going to send a message. That's all it is. It's sending a message. He's not trying to hurt somebody, but he's certainly not trying to make a legal play, right? He's saying legal things happen or illegal things happen to me night in and night out. And yeah, some of them are called, but my leg was broken on a play that wasn't called. So I'm going to do what I feel like I need to do. He literally was taken down by Giordano with no call and broken leg. So there's sometimes when you're that kind of player, you feel like I got to send a message. I only think Tom Wilson would be the kind of guy that I think a percentage would be fair because again, McDavid, he's just going to get somebody back, but then it's not fair because he's now having to pay like a huge percentage of money, whereas the other guy's like, yeah, well,
but he's not getting fined all the time. It's only when he does something egregious, right? Like no one's saying you can't go and put an elbow into someone's ribs or high stick someone or do
yeah.
we're talking about a guy who went multiple strides, targeted, cocked the elbow back, and ended up making contact with the head. Even though it started with the chest, he ended up making contact with the head. If that is anybody else, that's the favoritism right there. If that's anybody else, even if that's Matthews, I think that's a 1-game suspension, honest to God. But because it's McDavid, because it's their golden boy, that's a fine, and we're going to forget about it and move on from it.
I think the fine is going right along with your thinking. I don't think you're going to see that from McDavid ever again, if often, right? So the fact that they fine him puts him on the books. That's the whole point that they're trying to make is like, we're not fining you this time because we rarely ever seen that from you. But if we ever see it again, you're getting a suspension. So in a way, I disagree. I think Matthews would get the same treatment. I think anybody who's not a repeat offender or who doesn't play that way would get the same treatment. They'd receive a fine first. I think that happens
It
a
would just
lot.
be a louder message if it was more, in my humble opinion, right?
Okay,
Like
yeah.
like Tom Wilson, if he does that, if Tom Wilson did that, he's getting a 3-game suspension.
Right, because
Right.
he's been on
We're
the
not
books
even,
multiple
yeah,
times. Yeah,
we're
yeah.
not talking about a fine. We're not talking about a percentage. We're
I
talking
think
about
he's
him
getting half a
losing.
season, by the way.
We're losing 3 game checks
Yeah.
minimum, right? So that's a lot more than 25% of 1 game check. That's why I think 25% of a game check for an illegal hit, maximum allowable, right? We'll do it by the percentage. You want to go 5%, 10%, 15%, 20, 25%. Then you have a scale of how bad was the hit? How much are we going to fine this guy? What's the
I like that.
pocketbook going to take?
I
right?
like that because then you could take McDavid, for instance, and say that's only a 5%. Because I don't agree that that's
Yeah.
20. I don't agree that what he did there,
It's
that's a better
first
way
time.
to.
It's the blah blah blah, right? It's not automatic. That's the maximum. We're talking about the maximum allowable
Yeah.
fine under the CBA. 5K is a joke. It just is. It's been a joke for a long time. Steve Eiserman was making $19 million, right? That's a joke.
Okay, well, it did take us a while
be
to get
honest.
there, but I finally see what you're saying. You're being math guy about it, and that's it. You're just basically breaking it down from a math perspective. Again, I'm like, well, how do this is a game about protecting the stars, and now you're saying let's add another element of not protecting them by saying they can't protect themselves or they have to pay extra. It's like, I didn't like that, but I see what you're saying. It's as long as you can at least have the scale go from 5 to 25%, and then in this case, I would say, yeah, like if Tom Wilson did that to Kotkaniemi, it's multiple games, if not half the season, based on your record. But for a guy like McDavid, I'm sorry, 5%. I'm not making you, pay $20,000 for this, whatever it is. Actually, that is 5%. But you know what I'm trying to say. I love how math guy over here. I tried to come up with an option, and it's my math. Oh yeah, 20% of 100,000 right there, 5%. 20,000. Anyway, MLB, man. Nick Castellanos just received a 2-game suspension today for a pretty funny video. If you haven't seen it, I want you to go look it up. John Boy Media is a great YouTube channel. He does a bunch of breakdowns, and this one is right up there with all the top breakdowns. Essentially, it goes back to a game before Castellanos just kind of being an idiot, and then he gets thrown at, and he doesn't like being thrown at, but that's baseball. We all know you get thrown at if a team doesn't like what you're doing. So he obviously played it up, was a little bit of a baby about it, but then he took his moment and capitalized when he got in kind of a rundown with the pitcher. You saw this too, John, right? He gets in the rundown, he ends up safe at home, so he scores the run, but in the process of kind of sliding into home alongside the pitcher, he kind of ends up like a little bit on top of him, and then he uses that moment to like stand over top of him like alpha male and flex in his face, and of course the bench is clear, and that's it. He gets a 2-game suspension for, as you mentioned, probably just inciting the bench is clearing brawl. But I thought it was cute. I thought it was a great way to start the season. Just I'm revved up and enjoy that. I just I got you back. But that's baseball, and they're handing out 2-game suspensions for that. Like, holy smokes, what did the pitcher get for throwing at him? That's what I'm curious about.
That'll probably come out. There'll probably be more than one suspension. There normally is when it comes to benches clearing brawls, and I use the word brawls in quotations because that was more like a benches clearing COVID protocol violation.
Yeah.
Here in Canada. That's basically what that was. A giant block party for about 2 seconds, and then everyone cleared out. A yelling match. And Castellanos stayed stone-faced the whole time is what I loved about it. He wasn't chirping back. Yeah, he wasn't chirping. He was just there all stone-faced, like he was just a G. He's like, whatever, you can say what you want of me. I got what I needed to get out of this situation, and I'm gonna go back to that dugout and I'm gonna laugh my ass off, right? And so good for him. It's an alpha male sport. This is a sport where all everyone is talking about is we need to make this more relevant to the young demographic. We need to make this sport more exciting, more energetic. We need to get more eyes on the sport, right? And these situations, as much as you don't want to talk about it, fights made people watch hockey, right? And so energy and rivalries and stuff like that will make people want to watch baseball. Characters, personalities, different color hair, bat flips, home runs, benches clearing brawls, just like being personable, being yourself, amp yourself up to like 5, like a wrestler would, right? And
Yeah.
and bring that personality to life and show us and who you are and really be invested in your talent, right? And invested in the game. That's what's going to make people want to watch the sport. And that's what I like about this situation is Castellanos is 100% in the moment there. He's not thinking about, I'm going to hurt this guy. I hate this guy. I'm going to score. And then when he scores, he's like, hell yeah, I scored, right? And he flexes over, and he probably didn't say hell yeah, let's be honest, but
PG.
PG here, and yeah, I'm here, I'm here all for it. 2 game suspensions, 162 games. It's a break for Castellanos. It's going to be a long season. I know the season just started, but that's nothing. So I love it, and I want to see more of it.
Just watching the Jays right now. They're up 5-1, top of the sixth. They got 2 guys on, 2 outs. I think Vladdy just, just flew out because he was at the plate a second ago. It was Vladdy or somebody else. Either way, Jays are up 5-1 on the Texas Rangers. The start of a new series. They got 50,000 fans in attendance, so it's odd to see that. But yeah, opening series in New York was an overall success. Straight from Charlie Montoyo's mouth, he said there's a lot to like about the team's play. I thought individual performances all around were pretty positive. I can only really pick out one play in my memory. It was yesterday where you kind of shook your head. Vladdy gave up on a bit of a blooper single. Do you know the play I'm talking about? I think it was third or fourth inning. Semyon comes over to try to kind of make up for it, and then none of them get it, but it like lands between 3 guys, and you kind of go, okay, that's a sign of rust, sign of immaturity, sign of whatever. But Vladdy hasn't looked bad on first base, although I recall last season he was a little bit too aggressive sometimes, trying to take plays from guys. I just thought that one was probably his, and he gave up on it. But then again, maybe he's trying to learn from past mistakes and thought it wasn't his ball to play. Either way, that's it. There was one little small play in my memory where I'm like, uh-oh. But other than that, even with the offense going 4 for 25 with runners in scoring position, still managed to get 2 wins out of it. You can disagree if you like, but I thought Zoik looked pretty good on the mound yesterday. Today, Matz was pitching. I think he's gone now. I believe they've taken him out if they're in the 6th. But then again, remains to be seen. They're actually at the plate, so I'm not sure. Either way, it was a great opening series, and we're looking to see a bounce back from Mets. I think this season because he had a tough season last year with the Mets. Mats on the Mets. It's kind of a tricky one to say. But what do you
Okay,
think?
so first thing first, Matz is still in. 5
Okay,
innings pitched. 5 innings pitched and 2 hits, one earned run, 5 strikeouts. So still in the game. Jays are now in the middle of the 6, 5-1.
yep.
So the Texas is about to come up. We'll see if he remains in the game beyond this. The Vladdy Guerrero play you're talking about, was that from the season opener?
No, this was just yesterday. Actually, it was the
Okay,
third
because
third game.
I do remember a play where I don't know if it was game 2 or game 3, but Teoscar Hernandez took charge. There was one where one landed in front of the 3 of them, and then one after that where Teoscar Hernandez took charge and he chased the ball down and he did make the catch in right field, in very shallow right field, with Semyon and Vladdy both closing in on it. So I think that's a chemistry situation where
Yeah,
this is a different Vladdy. He's more mobile. This Marcus Semyon is brand new, and Teoscar Hernandez, as much as he's played at the outfield, this is the first time we've got him here right in right field, and it's like he's going to be the right fielder. He's not really going to move around. He played left today because Gurriel had the day off, but on most nights he's going to play right field. So it's just a comfortability thing, in my opinion. They'll get used to each other. The biggest takeaway I had from game 1 was the infield defense. It was a little bit lacking for me. BGO didn't have the arm strength that I like to see throwing third to first, and Bo Bichette, he was flipping his throws over from shortstop to first, and the middle infield was making it really tough on Vlad, making him have to stretch for a lot of plays. And have to reach for the ball left and right, up and down, right? And that's not setting him up for the best success. Yes, first baseman should be able to make those moves, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. proved he could do that in those games. He was stretching in ways that I haven't seen him stretch before, so he's got to be more limber. He's got to be in better shape. But then you progress, you go to game 3, and even in today's game, and you look at the way the infield defense has progressed, and Bo Bichette is throwing the ball stronger, more centered, getting his feet moving, and it's right in center line with Vladdy. BGO has got more strength on the throw. It's right in center line. Same with Semyon. They're putting Vladdy in the best possible position and not making him have to stretch as much. So once again, another, I guess the biggest takeaway for me is that the comfortability of the whole team as we go along here. It's good to have 2-1 record and hopefully onto a 3-1 record here after today. But as we go on, we'll see this team get more and more comfortable with each other. Pitching has looked great.
yeah.
And
Merriweather is the big standout in that in the end, right? The two games now where he's made the most out of his opportunity. I think it's 22 pitches he's thrown in total, 19 have been strikes. Like this guy, he's coming in and doing the job. Essentially, a guy that we didn't have a lot of expectations for. He's older, like he's 29, so I remember them saying like we're expecting him to have a bit of a bounce back. But like he was the name in the oh, I'm thinking of the wrong pitcher. Sorry, but he was the name in the Donaldson trade. That's who I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
Merriweather.
the player to be named later. Yeah,
My bad. My bad. I'm getting
who
two things
where
mixed
we
up.
got him from. But I was gonna say, you read my mind. Merriweather is definitely the story after losing Kirby Yates, who was supposed to be the
Oh
closer for
man,
the team.
he
Losing him
won't
to
pitch
Tommy
a
John.
game in the Jays uniform, correct? Like that
Yeah,
was a
no,
1 year
he's done.
deal, and he's done for the season. So he's moving on.
Yeah. But on the plus side, they don't, or they saved $4.5 million when he hurt himself, so they do still have money on the that they can allocate
Right.
to pitching elsewhere. So there's that, and they knew going into it that it was a possibility. Kirby Yates had Tommy John surgery 10 years ago, right, and he had bone spur surgery, I believe, last year as well to remove some loose bodies from his elbow. So it's something that the Blue Jays were pretty aware that could be a possibility. So high risk, high reward situation. And obviously in this situation, it was the high risk that ended up coming out. So Merriweather is going to get a shot, and people are posing the question: is it Romano or is it Merriweather who your closer is? But I think it's been pretty apparent just by default right now that Julian Merriweather has to be the guy, right?
Oh, he's
Romano
hitting
is
100. He's basically throwing nothing but strikes, and he's getting saves. Like that's pretty much it. Unless he stops being good, then that's your closer. That's pretty much all they can hope for right now. They didn't have anybody, and this guy's doing it. It's kind
Yeah,
of
I
crazy.
think it's just a confidence thing, right? With the Blue Jays, and they should be confident in Merriweather after these couple games, right? But maybe they weren't confident enough to put him in that situation because it was Romano's spot. People were talking about how it was going to be his spot to be the
Fair, yeah.
closer, and he has the stuff to do it. He really does. But I think that Merriweather has a special set of stuff, right? He's got a 79 mile an hour changeup, and then, like you just said, a 100 mile an hour fastball.
That's a lot of variance. Yeah.
That's a massive. That's a 22 mile an hour difference in pitches, right? And you saw it with Hicks in believe it was Merriweather's first at bat. Was Hicks with the Yankees, and Hicks he was baffled. He got two 79 mile an hour changeups and a 100 mile an hour or 99 mile an hour fastball, and he's just left there like hands in the air, like, what am I supposed to do with this guy,
Well, and
right?
that
So
might be part of the reason why he's not afraid to throw it in the zone because he knows he's got such a variance with that speed that he doesn't have to kind of get guys he doesn't have the same kind of movement, right? Or doesn't have to kind of get guys swinging outside the zone. He's just throwing it right there. He's thrown three balls. Three balls. Like that's pretty impressive. Man, every time I'm watching a Jays game, especially the ones I go to, I'm always keeping an eye on what the control looks like. And I swear I went to a game the last couple of times and it's like especially starters like throwing more balls and strikes and I'm like that just tells me that you have no stuff and you're just doing anything you can to try to make a guy guess. But in the end, like I don't know a lot about pitching. It's good to see a guy that's kind of not a name. He had 0 career saves coming into the season, and he's got 2 in 3 games. So you're looking at a guy who would be on nothing but a high of confidence, who's got the stuff to do it, and is strictly a closer right now. So he's got to be living high. He's got to be feeling good about himself, and we just hope that it's kind of continues. The only other points I had to make here that there's a real chance Springer could make his debut on Thursday. I read that in the Athletic this afternoon, and that would be the home opener in Dunedin. So that was Ross Atkins mentioning that, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. We already saw, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Semyon hit his first dinger as a Blue Jay, so we're looking forward to seeing Springer in his debut because he was the big fish that they signed in the offseason. And then the other point is just Vladdy couldn't really have much better start this season. Like he's essentially in opening day. I made this point: three plate appearances against Garrett Cole. We had the
the
single and
missile.
then the single and then the 2 walks. Though the walks were just things of beauty when you're watching this guy. I think it was whoever mentioned it on the broadcast. I could have been watching the away broadcast because I streamed the games. But they essentially said that's the sign of a mature hitter, right? That's somebody who, when you're first coming up in the league, you're trying to prove you can smoke the ball and you're maybe not so dedicated to your discipline. But that was from what I remember, Vladdy's main kind of caveat is, yeah, he's a big hitter, but his plate discipline is elite. So it's nice to see that in that first kind of game of the season up against like a world class pitcher. Like that's how the confidence just starts and gets the ball rolling down the hill. Hit his first home run of the year yesterday, 380-foot drive. And just, I'm feeling good about Vladdy. We see Tatis Jr. getting the big contract, Acuna Jr. getting a big contract. And if Vladdy was here first before both of those guys, am I correct? And he still is yet to, bloom. He's really yet to hit the potential that was supposed to be there.
Yeah, Vladdy's looked great. He's been everything that
Lost a ton of weight too. Can't mention that.
The prophecy is real, right? The prophecy is real. That's all. That's all we have to say is like everything everyone said about him is coming true. He's in a much healthier state of body right now, so that's obviously helping. He had mentioned last year that he was relying on his talent alone, just trying to hit the ball, and as opposed to playing the game of baseball, thinking the game of baseball, and doing it the right way. And that's having these extended at bats and not swinging at everything. And
yeah, it's not batting practice out there anymore.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
right. That's exactly it. And so now you're seeing that this year, and it's funny that you bring that up because I was watching, like I said, I was watching the first inning of today's game, and Vladdy was up to bat, and he had an RBI single in the first inning, and it was an extended 8-pitch at bat where he laid off nasty slider after nasty slider outside from Fultonavich, and then he hit a bleeding single into right field. And it's one of those things where it's like, man, if you did that every time, I don't care. I'll take that every single time. I know you've got the ability to hit the 300, 400, 500-foot home run, but it's the patience and the mentality to be able to hit those bleeding bloop shots out to right field after an extended at bat that really expand your game. So Vlad's been fantastic. Can't wait to see Springer, and can't wait to see how the rest of this rotation pans out for the Blue Jays. Matz has been fantastic. Still in the game through 6 with 6 innings pitched and 8 Ks.
Look at that. They're showing this last pitch here. Look at the movement on that. Gets him swinging, and it's up way up top.
Strikes out the side. Just fantastic. He's looking like the Steven Matz of old. And if the Jays have been able to hit the jackpot with this, if Pete Walker has done it again, then it's only good signs for the Blue Jays to have a strong left-handed rotation.
I'm behind you. Solak just came to the plate. They're showing the last strikeout. That was very nice. Very nice. Anything else you want to touch on the Jays? I think we've gone pretty long compared to what the plan was today. Anything else?
Not particularly.
No burning thoughts.
Well, I mean, I had a little bit of a burning thought about Tatis, but we can get into that. We can get into that on the next episode. That's stuff for when we're digging for content. But if people are wondering about my train of thought, not to leave you on a cliffhanger, if you want to know what I'm thinking about, go ahead and take a look at Major League Advance or Big League Advance, and look at the Tatis contract. And not only Tatis wasn't the only person to hit the jackpot the day he signed that contract.
Okay, we'll leave us on that. Does sound like a bit of a cliffhanger. I'll go do my homework, and we'll meet up sometime later on in the week to get back into this. Of course, all the pressing stuff's been dealt with, so we'll keep an eye on the trade deadline. We'll keep an eye on how the Jays continue until then. And unfortunately, the Raptors are 9-30, so maybe next time we get together, we'll talk about that. And maybe
they put a whooping on the Golden State Warriors, but I don't want to talk about them until they've done more than one win in a row here. So let's get it moving.
That makes sense. All right, John, thanks for getting together with me again. It's been good to talk.
All right, thanks, Ryan. We'll get back at it again next week. Peace.
Oh, yeah, buddy. Take care. Bye-bye.
Later, man.